do want to ask you about your manufacturing plan in just a second, but just given that we're on the Australia Day theme, you heard Scott Morrison there in a radio interview this morning. He talks about today being a day of healing, but I wonder how you think we achieve that when you've got Australia Day celebrations taking part and you've got Invasion Day marches taking part as well. I mean, how is this achieved? It's such a heated debate. It kind of goes away after Australia Day, but then it comes back again the next year.
Well, I just think we need to listen more to the quiet Australians. Yes, there'll be some loud Australians out there on the streets today, but they're in no way anywhere near a majority of Australians. Indeed, I would say they're a very, very significant minority. The vast majority of Australians will be celebrating Australia Day the same way we have for generations, where we sit back, maybe have a cold drink, maybe have a barbecue, spend some time with the family, and thank God that we live in such a great country. We're a laid-back country, and we don't always flaunt our nationalism that strongly, but we are proud. The average Australians in my street, there's Australian flags today flying down my street. I've got to put mine up, actually. I haven't done that yet. So I've been preparing to get on with you, but I'll do that straight after this interview, and we'll celebrate how lucky we are. I mean, we're not a perfect country, but by God, name a country you'd prefer to live in.
Changing a date, what do you think it would achieve?
Nothing. Well, what it would achieve is that just the caravan would move on to the next thing. Like a few weeks ago, we wanted to change the anthem, so we changed the anthem. Now we want to change the date. If we change the date, they want to change the flag. If we change the flag, they want to change the monarchy. They want to change the government. These people will never be assuaged because, let's be clear here, many of the activists, not all the people who support the idea, but many of the activists who want to move the date, the very loud, noisy ones on the street today, many of them are not campaigning to change Australia Day. They're campaigning to change Australia. They don't like the country. They want radical change to it. And as I say, they're a very, very significant minority. I think the large bulk of Australians actually think this is a pretty good country. As I say, we're not perfect. We can always improve things. But by any standard, measured against any country, we're one of the most prosperous, free, lucky countries in the world. Yeah, but not prosperous for those remote communities where life expectancy is low and deaths in custody is high. I mean, they are the issues that we need to tackle, right? Absolutely, and changing the date will do nothing for those issues. Those things need to be tackled directly, and I also worry sometimes some of the distraction, some of the focus on issues like the date or the anthem are simply a distraction from the hard choices and hard decisions that need to be made about those other issues because they have proven to be intractable.
Yeah, and those issues aren't being
we shouldn't sideline those issues and focus on these trinkets.
Yeah, well, those issues aren't being fixed, and it's not just the current government; it's previous governments as well. I mean,
that's right.
The issues are so complex and they're so difficult, but how do you fix them?
Yeah, well, you don't do it by changing a date. We could have a very long discussion about that. My view is you've got to create economic opportunities before you get social improvements and cultural improvements, but others might have a different view. But look, as I say, they've proven intractable. I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers, but we should focus on these difficult questions. Not on ones that don't really matter much at all.
OK, just on to the Nationals' backbenchers today, putting together a manufacturing plan that's going to create some 800,000 jobs in the next 15 years. How do you believe that can be achieved?
We've got to have cheaper energy. We've got to protect our manufacturing industries. We've got to support strategic industries through tax incentives. We've got to build overseas markets. We should strengthen our procurement rules so we actually buy Australian, not just talk about buying Australian in government contracts. And of course, we need to train people better for manufacturing skills. They're all things in our 9-point plan to boost manufacturing. We should recognise where we are at the moment, though. We are not in a position of strength. We now have the second lowest share of our economy devoted to manufacturing in the developed world. Only Luxembourg has a lower share. Late last year, a new record low of Australians, fewer than 850,000 Australians were employed in manufacturing. So we have a lot to do. Why have we declined so much recently? It's been because of higher power prices and because of the flaunting of international trade rules kicked off by China's joining the WTO. So we should tackle those things directly. We should build things like a coal-fired power station to lower power prices. We should get serious about protecting our industries from unfair competition when other countries steal our jobs by providing massive subsidies to their own industries. So why don't we protect our own industries, like our steel industry? We produce the world's largest amount of iron ore and coking coal. let's make sure we produce more steel here as well.
But the timing of this is dubious, though. It comes a day after Angus Taylor and John Kerry had conversations about trying to reduce carbon emissions. Are you deliberately agitating against that with the timing of this manufacturing plan?
This plan has been in the works for almost a year. I've been working on it for that time. I actually would have hoped it got out last week, but you know how the media works, Peter. It's hard sometimes with all the different things around. Last week there's a few things going on in the US.
Inauguration, a pretty big deal.
I didn't choose the day, but I'm glad we're getting some. We're talking about manufacturing because it's so important for our country's future, especially given the strategic threats we're seeing in the region. They have really ramped up over the last couple of years, and again, I don't think it's a smart position to be in, where we have the world's only Luxembourg has a lower share of manufacturing in their economy than we do, and we're in a very volatile region. You can't just snap your fingers and create cheap power or build factories overnight. If things go badly, we should be doing that now and preparing for that.
Well, I mean, your opponents will say, and they have already said, that these sorts of jobs can be created with renewable technologies.
Well, that's failed. That's clearly failed. We've been trying to do that for a decade, and this last decade is the first time on record that Australian manufacturing output has fallen in absolute terms. It's actually fallen. We've gone backwards. We produced less things in 2020, or we produced less things in 2020 than we did in 2010. And that was after a decade of massive investments in renewable energy, massive subsidies to renewable energy, that all they've done is destroyed our energy competitiveness. We now have the world's, for businesses, we have the fifth highest power prices in the world, in the developed world. Fifth highest. We used to be down the bottom. Now our power prices are more than double those in the United States. We can't compete with this. We've got high wages, and I want to keep high wages, right? I think we'll always have a pretty high wage economy. And so if you've got high wages, you can't have high power prices and then think you're going to have a strong manufacturing industry. That doesn't compute. That doesn't work. If we want to be competitive in things like manufacturing with high wages, we've got to offset that with lower costs in other areas like low power prices, which we should have. And renewable energy investments have not delivered that. We've had 10 years. How long do we need to keep banging our head up against this renewable energy wall before we all recognise it is not working?
Well, why not
we've got
gas
to make choices about that.
Gas
we want a manufacturing industry.
Gas is the central plank for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and that's in our plan. We say we should devote more resources to finding an oil basin. The way to get cheap gas is to find oil. You're not going to get cheap gas if we just rely on the existing dry, non-oil-based coal seam gas fields of Western Queensland. I'm a supporter of coal seam gas. It can work, but it doesn't deliver cheap gas, and it hasn't. We're effectively at the moment tied ourselves to international gas markets. We've seen how volatile they've been in the past few weeks. Prices have gone up to more than $30 a gigajoule. They were down as low as $3 or $4 last year. So we should be now focused on finding a new oil basin to replace the Bass Strait, and the byproduct of that is cheaper gas.
Are you preparing for an election this year? Anthony Albanese reckons he can turn things around in Queensland.
Look, I don't think there'll be an election this year, but who would know? It's not my call. I think we've got to focus on this vaccine rollout. I want to be realistic and say that, look, other countries have found it difficult to roll out their vaccines. Hopefully we can do a really good job and have it done by the end of the year, which I think has been flagged. But, you know, as I say, we've got to be realistic about this. Other countries have found it quite difficult and quite a logistical exercise. So we've got to get that done first, I think. Let's focus on that. If that goes really, really well, maybe after that, when the economy is sort of getting back to normal, we do need to go to an election for a mandate for the future and do things like rebuild our manufacturing industry with the Australian people's support.